to make him happy and show your gratitude because you could. Most of us recognize that to have someone like that in our life is a gift, one that shouldn't be taken for granted. In fact, no relationships should be taken for granted. They are what life is all about, the whole point. How we cultivate our relationships is often the greatest determinant of the type of life we get to live. Business is no different. Real business isn't done in board meetings. It's done over a half-eaten plate of buffalo wings at a sports bar, or during intermission of a Broadway show. It's done through an enthusiastic greeting with an unexpected recommendation, or by offering up a cab when it's raining. It happens in the small, personal interactions that allow all of us to prove to each other who we are and what we believe in. Honest moments that promote good feelings and build trust and loyalty. Now imagine you could take these interactions and scale them to the hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people who make up your customer base, or better yet, your potential customer base. A lot of people would insist that achieving that kind of scale is impossible, and up until 5 years ago, they would have been right. Now though, scaling those interactions is not only possible, provided you use the right tools in the right way, it's necessary. Heck, I'm going to go off script right now. I would say 99% of you that are listening to this right now are buying this or bought this because I did this kind of interaction, that I did care, that I scaled my caring. In fact, those companies and brands that refuse to try could jeopardize the potential of their business, and in the long term, even their very existence. Why? Because when it comes right down to it, the only thing that will never change is human nature. When given a choice, people will always spend their time around people they like. When it's expedient and practical, they'd also rather do business with and buy stuff from people they like. And now they can. Social media has made it possible for consumers to interact with businesses in a way that is often similar to how they interact with their friends and family. Early tech adopters jumped on the chance to regularly talk to businesses, and as time goes by, more and more people are getting excited by the idea of following their lead. You may not have seen the effects of this movement yet, but I have. I see them every day. Trusting relationships and connections formed via social media are quickly becoming two subtle but rapidly growing forces of our economy. It is imperative that brands and businesses learn how to properly and authentically use social media to develop one-on-one relationships with their customer base.
Hope you're not actually sad.
No matter how big, so that they make an impact in their market, now and in the future. Social media is more than media. For the record, I dislike the term social media. It is a misnomer that has caused a boatload of confusion. It has led managers, marketers, CEOs, and CMOs to think that they can use social media sites to spread their message the same way they use traditional platforms like print, radio, television, or outdoor, and expect similar results and returns. But what we call social media is not media, nor is it even a platform. It is a massive culture shift that has profoundly affected the way society uses the greatest platform ever invented, the internet. Unfortunately, when the business world is thinking about marketing via
I can literally feel my brain
YouTube,
expanding.
Facebook,
just
Twitter, Foursquare, and Daily Booth,
my
and let's
IQ
add
increasing.
Tumblr and Yobongo and GroupMe and Fast Society and all the new stuff that's been popping since I wrote this, it's thinking about using social media. So that's the term I'll use too. Great news is in the eye of the beholder. Finally, a way to really connect with our customers, an opportunity to hear what they want, what they think, how things went, how our product worked, or how it didn't. At last, a chance to create personal and creative campaigns that do more than shove our message down our customers' collective throats. Don Draper would have dropped his whiskey glass in joyful delirium if you had told him that his agency didn't have to run focus groups anymore to find out what people wanted. Think of all the money that brand managers could have saved over the decades on test marketing and other classic research techniques, which, in all these years, haven't done much to improve a new product's risk of failure, estimated at 60 to 90%. They'd be looking cross-eyed at today's social media marketing skeptics for not recognizing great news when they hear it. But shockingly, a lot of people don't want to hear it. if it's true that one-on-one is quickly becoming one of the most important ways to reach customers, then it means a massive number of businesses are eventually going to have to undergo a total cultural transformation to compete. That's a thought most corporate execs are going to meet with about as much enthusiasm as Dwayne Wade would have if he were suddenly faced with the undeniable proof that basketball was dead and ice hockey was the only game left. Yet, let's remember it wasn't so long ago that few people who owned home computers used them almost exclusively for word processing and video games. In 1984, you would have gotten stuffed in your locker for gloating over your new Apple Macintosh. In 2007, you could score a hot date by showing off your new iPhone. Culture changes, and business has to change with it or die. Why I speak in absolutes? Because if I give you an inch, you'll run a mile with it. When I said in 1998, you're dead if you don't put your business on the internet and get on e-commerce, was it true? No. But boy, could you imagine trying to do business in 2010 with zero web presence? I'd rather shock you into paying attention and admit later that business rarely requires an all or nothing approach than take the chance that you won't take this situation seriously enough. Unfortunately, a lot of business leaders and marketing professionals can't see that change is here. Not coming, not around the corner, here. They look at the business being done on Twitter, Facebook, My Yearbook, and Foursquare and say with contempt, prove it. My pleasure. In this audiobook, you'll listen about an array of big and small companies in a variety of industries that were proud to share how they successfully improved their bottom line by leveraging and scaling the relationships made possible by social media. When looked at as a whole, these examples offer undeniable evidence that there is financial gain for any size company that is willing to open the lines of communication with its customers and market to them in a personal, caring way that makes them feel valued. There is no reason why any company couldn't make these efforts and achieve similar results. Social media makes the internet an open, level playing field where any limits to how far you want to spread your message and your brand are self-imposed. The secret to these companies' success is that at some level, they figured out how to put into practice a number of ideas I want to explain in this program. The building blocks necessary to create a powerful, legacy-building company culture, how to recreate the perfect date when developing your traditional and social media strategies, using good intent to set everything in motion, delivering shock and awe to your customers without investing a lot of money, just a whole lot of heart. In addition, they weren't held back by fear or the arguments many leaders use to dismiss the effectiveness of social media. In this book, I'll tackle the most common of those arguments and explain why they don't hold any water. Consumer expectations are changing dramatically, and social media has altered everything about how companies must relate to their customers. From now on, the relationship between a business and a customer is going to look very different from the way it has looked in the recent past. The heart and soul of the matter. How do people decide they like each other?
You guys can
They
vote.
talk. They exchange ideas.
All two of you.
They listen to each other. And eventually, a relationship forms. The process is no different for building relationships with customers. If your organization's intentions transcend the mere act of selling a product, and it is brave enough to expose its heart and soul, people will respond. They will connect. They will like you. They will talk. And ultimately, they will buy. A survey of parents preparing for the fall 2010 back-to-school shopping season found that 30% of them expected that social media would affect their purchases. Another survey conducted in early December 2009 revealed that 28% said their buying decisions had been affected by social networking, with 6% admitting to being influenced by a friend's Facebook status about a product and 3% being influenced by a friend's tweet. Now, I'm going off script because that's how I roll. That was December 2009. What do you think those numbers are going to look like in December 2011? I guarantee they're going to be bigger. More and more people are making business and consumer decisions based on what they see talked about on social media platforms. The thing is, people don't talk about things they don't care about. So it's up to you to make them care, which means you've got to care first. Let me go off script for one more second because I'm on a rally now. It's kind of like parenting. The reason so many of us love our parents so much is they loved us first. I really think businesses have to think about this whole pay forward concept, and that's what we get into in a little bit. All right, let's keep it going. When I first started tweeting, I had no brand recognition. No one knew who I was. To build my brand, I started creating conversations around what I passionately cared about: wine. I used search.twitter.com. Back then, it was known as Sumize. This site, Sumize.com, was huge for me. It was SUMMIZE.com. Don't need to go there. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now search.twitter.com. Twitter bought it. To find mentions of Chardonnay, Merlot, Pinot Grigio, I saw that people had questions, and I answered them. I didn't post a link to winelibrary.com and point out that I sold Chardonnay or Merlot or Pinot Grigio. If people had mentioned they were drinking Merlot, I gave them my Merlot recommendation, but I didn't mention that they could buy Merlot on my website. I didn't try to close early like a 19-year-old guy. I made sure to invest in the relationship first. Eventually, people started to see my comments and think, oh, hey, it's that Vaynerchuk guy. He knows that Chardonnay stuff. He knows wine. Oh, cool. He does a wine show. Let's take a look. Hey, he's pretty funny. I like him. I trust him. And check it out. He sells wine too. Free shipping? Let me try a bottle. And so that's how it kind of went. That's what caring first, not selling first, looks like. And that's how I built my brand. That's what I mean about revealing your company's heart and soul. There's only so low you can go on price. There's only so excellent you can make your product or service. There's only so far you can stretch your marketing budget. Your heart, though, is boundless. Maybe it doesn't sound realistic to expect anyone to be that emotional in business, but hey, how many people thought you would be tending to a virtual farm 3 years ago? Meanwhile, at its peak, Farmville saw 85 million players. And I'm going to go off script real quick because some of you might not know this. Farmville was an iconically popular game within Facebook. You probably saw people in their Facebook status have things like they fed their sheep and stuff of that nature. So 85 million active players a day. TV would beg to have those kind of numbers. Now, I realize that your reality isn't boundless. Scaling one-to-one relationships and hiring employees to help you costs money and time. But in this book, I'll show you that when you spend money on social media, you're not actually investing in a platform, you're investing in a culture and in customers who can ultimately become your ambassadors. We'll examine the return on investment and talk about how to make every dollar count. Ideally, though, your goal should be no interaction left behind, because what pays off most is your willingness to show people that you care about them, about their experience with you, about their business. It's not as hokey as it sounds. In fact, it's exactly how the business world used to run. I believe that we are living through the early days of a dramatic culture shift that is bringing us back full circle, and that the world we live in and work in now operates in a way that is surprisingly similar to the one that our great-grandparents knew. Social media has transformed our world into one great big small town, dominated, as all vibrant towns used to be, by the strength of relationship, the currency of caring, and the power of word of mouth. In order to succeed now and in the future, it's going to be imperative that we remember what worked in the past. When caring meant business. If you're lucky enough to spend any time around an 80 or 90-year-old who still has their wits about them and their memory intact, you'll inevitably hear them remark about how much the world has changed since they were young. Most elderly people can easily identify many ways in which the world has changed for the better, but they often express more than a hint of regret for a time when things moved more slowly, when people knew their neighbors, and when strangers and friends alike were expected to treat each other with courtesy and respect, even if they didn't feel like it. They also reminisce about how retailers and local businesses made it a point to know your name and make you feel like family when you walked in. As well they should have. Whether you lived in a small town or one of the small town communities recreated in city neighborhoods, it was entirely possible the business owners / managers had known you your entire life. Back then, there was no need to encourage people to buy local. Local, for the most part, was all there was. If your mother bought her meat at Butcher Bob's, it's pretty likely that you shopped at Butcher Bob's too. Butcher Bob knew your family, knew your tastes, and knew that during cold months, he should reserve a ham bone for you to flavor your weekly batch of split pea soup. Oh, by the way, going off script, and you're going to find this ridiculously interesting, I almost just ordered split pea soup. I went with chicken and noodles, right, guys? I went with chicken and noodles, but, I was like super close. That would have been pretty epic. Damn, I'm kind of pissed I didn't. How Butcher Bob treated you when you walked into the store was as crucial as the quality of his ground beef. It wasn't that you only had to walk 3 blocks over to see what rival Butcher Bill had to offer in his case. It was that if you weren't happy with the service you received, if, for example, Butcher Bob refused to reimburse you for the freshly ground chuck that you bought home only to discover it wasn't so fresh, you'd vent your outrage to the PTA or a trade union meeting or the country club. That was Butcher Bob's worst nightmare. If the PTA, trade unions, or country club members represented a big chunk of his customer base. To lose one disgruntled customer could often mean losing 10 of his or her friends and relatives. In the smaller, tight-knit communities of yesteryear, 10 people represented a lot of revenue. Businesses lived and died by what was said via word of mouth and by the influence people had with one another. That meant every person who walked through the door had to feel as though he or she mattered. Unless he was the only game in town, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, heck, everyone who had to deal with customers had to be as friendly, accommodating, and, when necessary, apologetic as the other guy, if not more so. That was an era when business could stay in family hands for several generations. Often the business wasn't just a way to make money, it was something the owners and managers closely identified with and in which they took pride. When the business was relatively new, the people who ran it often cared as if their life depended upon it because, well, it did. The business was their ticket to the American dream. This was what was going to launch their children's future. They were in it for the long haul. It was about their legacy. And in the end, when they retired, they were probably still going to live among the people with whom they had done business for many years. Their customers weren't just walking wallets, they were friends, neighbors. So business owners cared about their customers. A lot. And I'm going to go off script again because this is very near and dear to me. This is my life story. I immigrated to the United States in 1978. I was 3, but this is the way my dad approached his small liquor store business. It was our lives. It was the way I was going to buy stuff. It was everything. And it's just really amazing to me how this is the DNA of what is going to break through in a noisy world. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Word of mouth loses its voice. That world our grandparents and great-grandparents knew, the one which relationships and word of mouth could have direct impact on an individual's personal and professional reputation and on the success or failure of one's business, began to disintegrate around the time when ordinary people like Butcher Bob bought their first car. In the years between the mid to late 1920s and the post-World War II boom. Around the middle of the last century, a whole lot of social and economic forces converged, and people took advantage of their affordable cars and the new highways built for them to head out to suburbia. As time went on, Americans started fleeing even further to exurbia. The countryside was paved with parking lots and lined with strip malls to serve the burgeoning commuter society. For many, the sign that you'd arrived was that you had managed to put as much distance as possible between yourself and everybody else, preferably with a gate. These decades that brought greater distance between friends, family, neighbors coincided with the rapid rise of big business. Butcher Bob retired just in time to avoid being crushed by the newly built Safeway supermarket chain, which would eventually include over 2,000 stores across the country. If the company that treated great-grandma like royalty even when she was only buying a $2 hat had grown and prospered, in all probability a corporation gobbled it up. Eventually, its reason for being became less about delighting the ladies with the newest fashion or building legacy and more about satisfying quarterly returns and improving stock options. The prioritization of profit over principle quickly took over American corporate culture and is what shaped the perspective of all ranks of many of today's business leaders. Most have never known anything else. They're just playing the game as they were taught. If you don't care, no one will. What happened next is almost forgivable. Almost. After all, consumers seem to have rejected old world values and abandoned small town or community oriented businesses. Plus, in the wake of a variety of social and cultural upheavals, manners took a nosedive. It was definitely time to ditch some of the fussy formalities society had long been saddled with. But manners, real manners, indicate that we care about other people's feelings and about their experience when they're around us. It was almost as if big business looked around, took note of the increasingly relaxed social norms, and thought, well, shoot, if they don't care, neither do we. If people were going to expect very little, little is what they were going to get. Companies started unloading anything that didn't immediately and directly track to pumping up their bottom line. It wasn't just about replacing the hats with cheaper, more modern fashions, nor did it mean simply phasing out little extras that made a customer feel like royalty. It meant powerbombing anything that showed the company cared about the customer experience at all. Supermarkets stopped hiring teenagers to load bags and carry them to the car. Going off script, I know, you might have a supermarket that does it, but I'm talking about the masses. Gas station attendants disappeared except in New Jersey and Oregon. And if you wanted to speak to a company about their products or services, you could press 1 to spell your name, press 2 to place an order, press 3 for more options, or press the star key to return to the main menu. As the 80s rolled into the 90s and companies relied increasingly on automated call centers, we were ushered into a customer service dark ages. People griped and moaned, but there was nothing they could do. Some even swallowed the company line that eliminating the unnecessary, time-consuming, expensive perks that customers used to take for granted, such as the privilege of speaking to a live human being, made it possible to keep prices down. We loved talking to you, but our loss is your gain. Enjoy the savings. The internet only made everything worse. For all its globalizing properties, it allowed us to take our isolationism even further. Now we didn't even have to go to the mall to do our shopping or the megaplex to see a movie. No matter where we lived, in fact, with a click of a mouse, we could bring the world, or rather, the world as we wanted to see it, with a selection of entertainment, politics, and media cherry-picked to meet our individual tastes straight to us without ever having to speak to another live human being. We could order our groceries online. We never had to leave the house. We could conceivably become a community of one. For business, our internet love affair was a gift from the gods. Online startups exploded, and the target markets for existing companies dramatically expanded. Businesses could now point proudly to their website and assure their customers that the lines of communication would never be closed. In theory, the website made them available 24/7. In reality, with few exceptions, these corporate websites merely made it much easier to truly pander to the idea of service without actually providing any. In fact, it made it possible for them to virtually avoid dealing with customers altogether. Now people could waste even more time clicking around on websites in a fruitless effort to find a phone number or the name of someone to speak with. When all that was available was an email address, they could send out a question, complaint, or comment into the ether and wait God knows how long until receiving a totally bland, formulaic, and useless reply. In the event they could dig up a phone number, they wasted millions, maybe even billions, of hours per year on hold, or being transferred from one helpless or hapless rep to another. As companies outsourced their customer service, customers struggled to make themselves understood by script-reading foreigners. They seethed, but as usual, there was nothing they could do. Corporations had nothing to fear. Their customer base was no longer in the local zip codes within a 5 or even 15-mile radius. It was the entire country, and in some cases, the whole world. So what if one person had their panties in a bunch, or even 100? How many people realistically were going to take the time to find sites like PayPalSucks.com, read them, post on them, and tell their friends? How many friends could they possibly tell anyway? It just wasn't worth the time, money, or effort to handle each customer, whether satisfied or disgruntled, with anything other than a token bit of goodwill. The ROI didn't justify doing things any other way. And for some of you that are listening right now, ROI stands for return on investment. Real big term in corporate America. They all want to know what the return on social media is. If you're wondering, the reason my tone has changed is because mainly I wrote this book for this reason. Small town living moves online. Then, around 2003, in the middle of this high-tech, digital, impersonal world, a new train started bolting across the online landscaping. It was nothing like the trains of our great-grandparents might have ridden, but for all its shiny digital modernity, in essence, it closed the vast distances created over a near century of car culture, cheap land, and technology. Many of us still lived far apart from one another, but we were about to be connected in a totally small-town way. The train was Web 2.0, now known as social media. It rode along the rails of the web at breathtaking speed, every one of its cars as powerful platforms designed with the express purpose of getting people to talk to one another again. The silent, anonymous, private internet suddenly turned extremely chatty, personal, and revealing. Small-town living moved online as people eagerly sought out each other's latest news. Our morning social media browse to check in on what everyone has been up to became the equivalent of the old-timers' early morning stroll to the diner for pancakes and coffee. We check Facebook and comment on a friend's photo of her new shoes, which we know without asking are Kate Spade's and were bought at Nordstrom's because she said so in her status update. The same way we once would have remarked, "You look lovely in that hat, Margie," as we passed by our neighbor. We click like upon seeing our friend's status update announcing his kid's graduation the same way we would have nodded approvingly upon seeing little Timmy had finally gotten the hang of his Radio Flyers scooter. We tweet an article and accompany it with some curses for the city management clowns bungling up upon yet another public works project with the same energy we used to rattle our newspaper and vent our frustration to all the other folks lined up next to us at the diner counter reading their paper, sipping their coffee, plain, black, and chewing on a donut. Social media allowed us to become more aware of the minutiae in each other's lives, of what was going on, of what people were thinking and doing than ever before. In the 1940s, we'd have found out about the progress of our neighbor's new wallpapering project or model ship during run-ins at the bus stop or the Piggly Wiggly. In 1990, we might not have even known about these projects at all. In 2010, we can not only know about them, we can see pictures and video chronicling their progress and get information about the retailers and service providers involved. In the beginning, a lot of people saw the banality of the topics flying around and wondered who could possibly care that Jeff in Boulder had found a half-eaten bag of Snickers in the pantry or that Liz in Miami was heading out to the beach for a run in her new Pumas. But people did care. Society jumped on the chance to recreate the regular exchanges of personal news and thoughts that used to be the staple of those smaller, relationship-based communities. A full-circle power shift. Still, most businesses, save for some ambitious entrepreneurs, didn't see any upside to jumping onto that train. Where could it possibly go that could be of use to them? Many leaders failed to see, some of them still fail to see, that the game they all learned to play has finally started to change. Those changes are going to be insane, by the way, in the next 5 years. By allowing dialogues to occur and relationships to grow on a daily basis for free between people living as far apart as Des Moines and Berlin who might never actually meet in person. Social media represents a gigantic power shift back to the consumer. Customers have more direct daily contact with other customers than has ever been possible in the history of the planet. More contact means more sharing of information, gossiping, exchanging, engaging. In short, more word of mouth. Now, Jeff's friend on the other side of the country, whom he hasn't seen in 6 years and who has fast forwarded through every television commercial since getting his first DVR in 2003, might see Jeff's post about a half-eaten Snickers, remember how much he likes that candy bar, and pick one up that afternoon while waiting in the supermarket checkout line. That's a plausible scenario that great-grandma could have never foreseen. How the new word of mouth is different. Word of mouth is back. Like Britney. Had to go off script. I'm sorry, guys. When society cut the close personal and business ties that existed in older, smaller communities, people became like ants scattered around on a picnic table. Really busy, really strong, but too far apart from one another to get much accomplished as a unit. Now, the internet has matured so that the power of social media can allow all the ants to collectively gather under the table, and they're strong enough to haul it away if they so choose. Any business person who can't see the repercussions of that much potential word of mouth has his or her eyes closed. For example, even if Martha isn't that interested in agriculture or the subject of genetically modified food, the fact that her friend in Paris might be enough to make her pay attention when spotting a post on a social networking or microblogging site like Twitter, Pinterest, Tumblr about the activities of some company called Monsanto. Maybe she reads the attached link and starts to form an opinion, and then reposts or retweets so that her 200 friends can see why she feels the way she does. She then enjoys the heated conversation that ensues with the 25 people who reply. Of those 25 people, 18 repost and retweet the original article with a personal message attached to their respective friends. According to Facebook, as of 2010, the average Facebook user has 130 friends, and the average Twitter account holder has 300 followers, which in total add up to the potential of 7,740 people who suddenly have Monsanto's name flying in front of their eyes. That doesn't even factor in the 175 people who had access to Martha's original post but didn't say anything to Martha about it. Some saw it, some didn't. But of those who did, who knows how many silently reposted it to people who might then, in turn, have reposted it. Think about how many thousands of people that represents. And many of them did it immediately from their smartphone that goes everywhere they go. There's no more lag between the time someone hears, reads, or sees something and the time that person can get back to a computer and shoot out an email to dozens of friends. News and information that had always traveled fast, whether being transmitted in older, tiny communities via front porch or window ledge, or in larger ones by balcony, fire escape, phone, or email, is now traveling across the world in real time. A crucial difference between the spread of information and opinion then and now, though, is that recipients of that information and opinion more often care about the individual sending it to them. Middlemen, pundits, and spokespersons no longer have a near monopoly on the widespread distribution of a brand or a company's message. We talk more passionately about the things we care about than about things toward which we are ambivalent. We listen more closely to people we care about than to people who we don't know. And now we are talking and listening in unprecedented numbers, and our opinions and purchasing decisions are being affected and influenced even as we stand in the store aisle and weigh our options. A few months ago, I went to Best Buy and I watched a teenager use his Facebook status to request recommendations on a Nintendo Wii game. He got feedback in real time and used it to decide what to buy. Recommendation and contextual social search are the future. Is it any wonder I'm not bullish on search engine optimization, aka SEO, long-term potential? Let me go off script here. Since I wrote this, Google came out and changed their search algorithm to incorporate social. So I don't want to say I'm awesome or I'm Nostradamus or Yoda, but I'm just saying I did say it and I did write it before it happened. So it's coming, and it's going to come in a bigger way. And if you're driving along right now, you may want to pull over and realize, holy crap, search is about to change dramatically. And for a lot of people listening, search is big business. Businesses that aren't able or willing to join the conversation will likely see their balance sheets suffer and catch hell from Wall Street. That's the best case scenario. Worst case, they aren't going to be in business much longer. Power to the people. Finally, when faced with bad service or unfair policies or plain old indifference, there is something people can do. Now, if customers have a complaint that they can't get resolved via traditional channels, they can post a frustrated status update or tweet that could get passed along forever. Suddenly, everyone who's ever had a problem with a company can compare notes, work him or herself up into a righteous frenzy, and build enough animosity via word of mouth to create a real PR nightmare. AT&T knows something about how this happens. Giorgio Galanti, who took AT&T to task on his blog called So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, wrote 2 emails to AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson. The first he wrote after the company's customer service reps were unable to authorize his request for an early iPhone upgrade. The second was to express his dissatisfaction with AT&T data rates. In the time since I first started writing about this story, Galanti appears to have taken down his blog as a little quick side note. In reply, Galanti received a voicemail from someone on the AT&T executive response team threatening legal action should he try to contact the CEO again. He finally received and accepted an apology from a senior VP, but by then the damage had been done. The story had spread all over the internet, and even CNN tried to interview him, a request, by the way, he declined. How many of the people following Galanti decided right then and there that the second Verizon gets an iPhone, they're switching? Or maybe their Droid phone wasn't so bad after all. Too many for AT&T's taste, I'm sure. Little side note, I remember thinking, the service isn't great, and the CEOs that can't take any feedback, I'm switching. And by the way, since this book came out, the Verizon iPhone came, and I switched. This example perfectly reflects the magnitude by which word of mouth has exploded. 5 years ago, it wouldn't have mattered that this guy was upset. He would have told 4 people. So what? Maybe, if he were a heavy hitter, he would have told some fellow board members, one of whom could have mentioned it to a journalist friend who would have written a story about it and forced the company to take the complaint seriously. But this would have been a huge rarity. The odds were that maybe 1 out of every million times somebody complained about a company, the newspaper would pick it up. If there was a particular juicy angle to the story, the chances were 10 million or 100 million to 1 that, let's say, a Nightline would pick it up. As in the case of Mona Shaw, who became a literal heavy hitter when she stormed her local Comcast office and smashed a customer service representative's computer and workplace with a hammer. But now, you don't have to have a juicy angle. You just have to care enough to talk about your experience, and everyone you know is going to rally, just as your friends in the PTA, the trade union, or the country club would have rallied if you vented your outrage at Butcher Bob's cheating ways. The story potentially makes it on its way to 100 of the most influential blogs, and suddenly AT&T has a massive headache. Everything is in reverse. Before, it made some financial sense for big business to simply ignore people they considered whiners and complainers. Now, dissatisfied, disappointed customers have the power to make companies feel the pinch. What a shame that that's what it's going to take to make some executives take social media seriously. It means they're using it only to react to the potential harm it can do to their business. There's so much unbelievable good it can do, though, especially when companies use it proactively. Going off the script, it's kind of like, why those Rams, 99 Rams or whatever year the Rams won that Super Bowl, they were offense. That's what I want business to be, on the offense, not defense. I love the 85 Bears, but you know what? When it comes to business, you're better to be a high-octane offense. Social media is a great tool for putting out fires, but it's an even better tool for building brand equity and relationships with your customers. Once you stop thinking about it as a tool for shutting customers up and rather as a tool for speak up and for you to speak to them, a whole world of branding and marketing opportunities will unfold. The thank you economy. At its core, social media requires that business leaders start thinking like small-town shop owners. They're going to have to take the long view and stop using short-term benchmarks to gauge their progress. They're going to have to allow the personality, heart, and soul of the people who run all levels of the business to show. and they're going to have to do their damnedest to shape the word of mouth that circulates about them by treating each customer as though he or she were the most important customer in the world. In short, they're going to have to relearn and employ the ethics and skills our great-grandparents' generation took for granted, and that many of them put into building their own businesses. We're living in what I like to call the thank you economy, because only the companies that can figure out how to mind their manners in a very old-fashioned way and do it authentically are going to have a prayer of competing. Note that I said you have to do it authentically. I'm wired like a CEO and care a great deal about the bottom line, but I care about my customers even more than that. That's always been my competitive advantage. I approach business the same way I approach every talk I present. I bring this attitude whether I have an audience of 10 or 10,000. Everybody counts and gets the best I have to give. Going off the script. Oh no, there it is. I was about to go off the script. Don't edit this out. I want everybody to hear this. I got to be careful with the off the script thing because I was about to say this next thing. I was going to say that that's how people call professional, like you're a professional. But wait till I wrote. It's kind of hard when you wrote it a year ago. A lot of the time, we call people who do a consistently great job a professional or a real pro. I try to be a pro at all times, and I demand that everyone I hire or work with try to be one too. All my employees have to have as much of that caring in their DNA as I do. How else do you think I outsell Costco locally and Wine.com nationally? It started with hustle, sure. I always say the real success, though, of Wine Library wasn't due to the videos I posted, but to the hours I spent talking to people online afterward, making connections and building relationships. Yet, I could have hustled my ass off and talked to 1 million people a day about wine, but if I or any of the people who represent Wine Library had come off as phonies or schmoozers or full of crap, Wine Library would not be what it is today. You cannot underestimate the sharpness of people's BS radars. They can spot a soulless, bureaucratic tactic 1 million miles away. BS is a big reason why so many companies that have dipped a toe in social media waters have failed miserably there. At Wine Library, we don't just pull out the charm when a big spender walks in or when someone is unhappy, and we don't reply to inquiries with carefully worded legalese. We try not to calculate that one customer is worth more than another, and therefore worth more time and more effort, even as we recognize that a big customer can bring a lot to the table. How could we ever know who is potentially a big customer anyway? Maybe you've got a customer who spends only a few $100s with you a year. What you can't see is that customer is spending a few thousand elsewhere, maybe with your competitor. You have no way of knowing that customer's best friend is the biggest buyer in the category. Now, what if you were able to build a relationship, make a connection, tilt the person's emotions towards you, and capture 30, 60, or even 100% of what he or she spends? Your small customer would become a lot bigger. That's why you have to take every customer seriously. This is a basic business principle that has been talked and written about a great deal, and some companies take it seriously. But the playing field is so different now from, let's say, 1990, that companies can no longer treat it as a nice idea to which they should aspire. Valuing every single customer is mandatory in the thank you economy. If there's a problem, we at Wine Library never tell ourselves that once we handle this issue, we'll never have to deal with the person again. We talk to every single person as though we're going to wind up sitting next to that person at his or her mother's house that night for dinner. We make it clear that we want to help in whatever way we can, and that everyone's business matters to us, and we mean it. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try, we lose because someone else established a relationship first. For the most part, everyone has more than one place to find what it is you're selling. I've had people tell me that though they like what I do and live in my town, they buy from the other guy's liquor store because he's been good to them. I say, I'm cheaper, and I have way better selection, and I'll be good to you too. Heck, I'll be better. But I can't win because a relationship has already been formed. I can compete on price. I can compete on convenience. And if they'd give me a chance, I'd compete on caring too. But they're not going to give me that chance unless the other guy slips up. And even then, they'd probably give him a second chance because forgiveness is the hallmark of a good relationship. If I kept pounding, I might be able to win a percentage of my competitor's business. But the little guy in town will keep his customers' market share with real caring and service. Anyone working for a big company might be skeptical that a large business or even a strictly online business can form the same kind of friendly, loyal relationship with customers as a local retailer. I'm saying it's already been done because I lived it. I built my online company the same way I helped build the brick and mortar store. But it works only if everybody at the company gets on board, which is why unless you're building a new company from the ground up and can instill caring as your business's cornerstone, you have to be willing to embark on a complete cultural overhaul so that, like a local mom and pop shop, every employee is comfortable engaging in customer service and does it authentically. Your engagement has to be heartfelt or it won't work. A gift to customers and companies. People want this level of engagement from the companies with which they do business. They always did, but they lost the power to demand it. Let me go off script here. I wrote here, now they have it back. Now at least the process of them getting it back is. Maybe that was too much of a definitive statement, but the process has begun. And they're indulging in that power. Even the best of what formerly passed as good customer service is no longer enough. You have to be no less than a customer concierge, doing everything you can to make every one of your customers feel acknowledged, appreciated, and heard. You have to make them feel special, just like when great-grandmother walked into Butcher Bob's shop or bought her new hat. And you need to make people who aren't your customers wish they were. Social media gives businesses the tools to do that for the first time in a scalable way. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter give back to businesses too, in the form of real-time feedback. Companies can see for themselves when their lackluster advertising or weak marketing gets panned or ignored, and how their creative, engaging, authentic campaigns get praised and passed along. Even industries that have long resisted paying too close attention to metrics, such as newspaper editorial departments, are turning to online tracking tools to help them allocate resources and shape online content in blogs and podcasts. There doesn't need to be any guessing about how positively or negatively the public is responding to a brand when it's in the news or on TV. The public's reaction is often right there in black and white on Facebook while the cameras are still rolling. In the thank you economy, social media allows you to get fresh, visceral, real-time feedback, not stale focus group opinions. It blows my mind that so many companies resist social media. The fact that customers are open to speaking to them, not just to complain or to praise them, but to initiate dialogue, offer opinions, and provide feedback is nothing short of fantastic. They should be on their knees with gratitude for the tremendous opportunity they now have to quickly, and cheaply by the way, adapt and improve their strategies. Exceed expectations or lose. Before, people were satisfied if you sent them an email newsletter and the occasional 10% off coupon in the mail. That was considered great customer engagement. Anything more was unheard of. Now the standards have been raised by companies like Zappos, which will spend as much time on the phone with you as you need, and Fresh Direct, a New York online grocer that wraps your produce in bubble wrap and tucks an extra bunch of asparagus in with your order just to thank you for being such a great customer. Some retailers are known for charming their customers with thank you notes, like Hem in Austin, Texas, which, oh, by the way, also offers people wine and beer while they're shopping. Hem sends those thank you notes out a few days after you make your purchase. But how many online companies do it? Which is why Wufoo, an online HTML form developer, gets so much blog coverage when its customers receive handwritten thank you notes, sometimes crafted out of construction paper and decorated with stickers. What's extra special about Wufoo notes is that they don't appear to be triggered by any particular purchase. They're sent out randomly to longtime customers just to say thanks for doing business with us. Now, it is true that the more you give, the more people want. It breaks my heart that I want to fly first class now. Man, it does. It's so much nicer. And now that I know what it's like, I want it all the time. I could travel that way regularly, but I don't, because I don't want to be that guy. The real question is, though, why can't everyone on the plane get first class treatment? Even the passengers who aren't paying for bigger seats. I think they eventually will, because they're going to start demanding it. Not the perks, not the warm nuts and the champagne, or even the bigger seats and legroom, but the respect, the kindness. Absolutely. All businesses, not just the airlines, need to start treating their customers as though they're big spenders. My own father was worried about creating that kind of expectation at the liquor store because where would it end? And what would happen if we stopped offering more? I had to work hard to convince him that if we didn't do it, someone else would. We built the first-class customer service philosophy into the business, and people have raved about us. They came back. They raved some more. Their friends came to check us out, and they raved about us. And through great customer service and word of mouth, we built a large, loyal fan base. Oh man, Wine Library would be so much bigger today, though, if the thank you economy had been in full force when I got started. Because, geez, the amount of customers that I took care of from the heart, from 98 to 2007, let's say, that couldn't tell that many people with social platforms and mobile devices has got to be in the tens of thousands. We'll talk later about what to do when people make unreasonable demands. But for the most part, the kind of service people are learning to expect isn't that shocking. Companies just aren't used to having to give it. Now, people expect you to give a damn about them. Not only that, they expect you to prove it. And the only way to prove it is to listen, engage, give them what they want when you can, and when you can't. Give them an honest answer to why. They just want to be heard and taken seriously. That's all. Engagement is not a four-letter word. Tall order? Yep. A lot of work? Heck yes. But companies no longer have a choice. I know that for many business leaders, investing in engagement is the same as eating a mouthful of cotton candy. It tastes sweet, but leaves you with a whole lot of nothing. However, I'm going to show you that there is no more risk in allocating resources to perfecting your social media strategy than there is in screaming, "Buy my stuff," on television, radio, in print, or outdoor media. Then we'll focus on what needs to be in place for any company, whether big or small, B2B or B2C. I'll stop right there just in case. B2B is business to business, B2C is business to consumer. Cool or conventional, to use social media correctly to build one-on-one relationships. If you've already experimented with social media and it didn't work, there are only two possible reasons to why. Your product or service isn't any good, or number two, you're doing it wrong. We're going to assume that your problem is the latter. And I'm going to go off script right now because it's the former, you've got no shot. I mean, the bottom line is if you're not solving problems or your product's not good, there's no magic bullet, there's no marketing that's going to help. If there are any shortcomings in your brand or product, they might be starkly revealed once you start implementing social media correctly. Don't let this possibility stop you. Listen to your customers' suggestions and complaints, as well as their praise, by the way, and take the opportunity to fix the problem. Then use social media to show the world you've changed and improved. I'll introduce some shining examples of what social media done right looks like and what it can help companies achieve in an economy where an earnest, well-timed thank you, whether it's in the form of a handshake, a comment, or a sample, is worth as much to a business as a platinum Amex. I'm going to show you how incredibly far the effects of sincerely expressing, "How may I help you?" or "What can I do for you?" or "You are too kind," or "I am so sorry. What can I do to make this right?" or perhaps most importantly, "I am so happy to hear from you," can take your business in a world where word of mouth travels more quickly and holds more power than it ever has before. Succeeding in the thank you economy is not about simply being nice and selling in an inoffensive way. Anyone can do that. It's about taking every opportunity to show that you care about your customers and how they experience your brand in a way that is memorably and uniquely you. What caring looks like. Imagine you are the CEO of Super Duper Fans Inc., sitting in your local coffee shop and you overhear one patron say to another, "You know, you really get what you pay for. I'm trying to go green by not using my AC so much, so I went out and bought a bunch of fans. I didn't want to spend a fortune either, so I bought those Super Duper fans, the ones with the great ad on TV. Oh, the one with the monkey? Yeah, I've seen them. They're hilarious. I set them up and two are already broken. Figures, right? Piece of junk." Any executive or manager or sales rep who cares about the company and believes in what it does wouldn't hesitate to approach the table, introduce him or herself, defend the product, apologize for any inconvenience, and ask for another chance to prove how great the Super Duper fan really is. You might offer to replace the defective models, throwing in free shipping and delivery, of course, and include a 30% coupon for any other super-duper product. You do it in a heartbeat, and not out of the goodness of your heart, not because you're a nice person, but because you care about your company and want everyone who does business with it to have a great experience. Now explain this to me. If you care enough about your brand to react with this kind of interest and concern, were you to overhear this conversation in person, why wouldn't you respond likewise if you read these same comments online? If there are conversations about your brand or your product or service category happening in coffee shops and beauty parlors and subways, they are most likely happening on Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of popular blogs and forums, and you can quote-unquote hear them all. These conversations were always happening before the advent of social media, of course, but there was only so far they could go. In addition, all a business could do if it became aware of these conversations was to eavesdrop. Now, the talk and the word of mouth about your company or brand could go on indefinitely, but you have a tremendous advantage the business people before you didn't have. You and your entire team can participate in it and propagate it. To ignore that option is to become a lonely fly on the wall, witness to everything that is said about you, powerless to do anything about it. All you're setting yourself up for is a face-to-face with a fly swatter. Get on board. If you're an entrepreneur, you surely already know I'm telling the truth, because if you're having any success, it's extremely likely you're already engaging with your customers online and offline with equal intensity and enthusiasm. I hope my ideas and the examples in this audiobook will inspire you to take your business to the next level and give you ways to help others trying to make it. If you want to become CEO one day, you absolutely have to get on board this train. Bringing about a massive culture shift within a company takes a lot of time and finesse if you're going to do it well. You'll likely be competing against others who have been incorporating TYE principles into every aspect of how they do business from the day they open their first Twitter account. The person who gets started the soonest has the advantage, though not because of the number of fans and followers they may have. I'm not sure what those people who promise to donate $1,000 to Haiti. Just give the $1,000 to Haiti, you jerks. It's not the number of followers you have or likes you get. It's a strength of your bond with your followers that indicates how much anyone cares about what you have to say. In this game, the one with the most relationships wins. By the way, I really want to take this very personal stoppage and go off script. The amount of people that are leveraging natural disasters and causes to gain Twitter followers is disgusting. Please veer off on the side of the road right now, because I know a lot of you listen, or take out your iPhone while you're sitting and just chilling and listening to this and text yourself. The next time you see somebody on Twitter say, if I get 500 followers on Twitter, I'll give $500 to Haiti. Please send them my way so I can punch them in the face and call them out publicly, because that's disgusting to really leverage tragedy to gain a couple of followers. We all know what you're doing. Consumers' BS radars are better than you think. Mid-level managers who love what they do and want their company to compete and thrive and crush it, you see what I did there? That was the name of my first book, just a little off script there for you guys, have got to get this book onto their CEO's desk. Individuals can certainly adapt many of the lessons in this book to buff their own personal brand and even improve the way their department communicates and responds to people and organizations with which they do business. But for a whole company to successfully enter the thank you economy, many small practical steps and processes must be implemented that ultimately add up and result in a complete cultural transformation. Each baby step is easy to take, but only a total commitment to change over time from the top brass will ensure that the baby steps gain enough strength and speed to lead into a run. Unfortunately, many CEOs are afraid of implementing change, even when it's for the best long-term good of the company. That sounds harsh, but it's unfortunately true, and for good reason. I'm convinced that if company leaders didn't have to worry about stock prices or bonuses or their numbers, every one of them would be investing in social media by now. It just makes sense that the better you know your customers, the better you can tailor your marketing to them, and the more likely they are to buy from you. But many leaders can't afford to worry about the long term, because their survival and their bonuses depends on short-term results. On a recent flight, I read an article by an editor-at-large for the Harvard Business Review. I know. Mr. I don't read anything is reading the HBR. I apologize, but when you're on a plane, you're stuck. I was bored. They wouldn't let me take out my computer yet. That 5 minutes where people actually read something on paper is in between when you're allowed to take off and open electronic devices. It was in that little spot moment. That perfectly, by the way, crystallized the dilemma faced by even the most well-meaning CEOs. Now, quote, Wall Street is no friend to radical innovation. The article reported the results of a study from the Wharton School that found that even when it was clear that an industry was about to be rocked by massive changes, Wall Street analysts primarily gave thumbs up to company strategies that relied on old technology and seemed to ignore or minimize the validity of more daring attempts to take advantage of new technology. Wall Street puts CEOs in a near impossible situation, as described by Chris Trimble on the faculty at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. I've had CEOs tell me that ignoring Wall Street is the only way to do the right thing for the company's long-term future. They choose to invest in innovation, take the short-term punishment, in the form of a declining stock price, by the way, and hope that the punishment is not so severe that they lose their job. So what are people trying to convince their CEO that social media matters supposed to do when the metrics that they need to justify social media initiatives just aren't available yet? Start. If you already have started, take a second look at what you're doing. Try on a new pair of glasses and reevaluate. Be prepared. Stay alert to new ideas and innovations. Do whatever you can to bring the thank you economy sensibility into your company so that when you're finally able to implement initiatives, the foundation will already be set. Companies can certainly survive without social media. Maybe your competitors can afford to overspend on traditional platforms or have a lot of brand equity built up thanks to amazing content. But if they do nothing with social media and you do something, you will eventually have the potential to surpass them. Not thanks to any one platform and not overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But because you acknowledge that culture and customers' expectations can and will change. That in and of itself means that you are more adaptable and flexible and therefore have a better chance of surviving and flourishing in the thank you economy. One more time. If you succeed with social media, it won't be because of the platform. It will be because you acknowledge that culture and customer expectations can change. You are more adaptable and flexible than your competitors. If you apply social media correctly, your customers will buy more. They will be more loyal. They will spread your message. And they will defend you should you ever need them to. All of this adds up to your increased chance of surviving and flourishing in the thank you economy. You know the business world has changed. You can feel it, can't you? Go to a shopping mall, movie theater, stadium, and look at what the masses are doing. For better or worse, half, if not more, of the people walking around with their heads down, their fingers sliding and tapping over their handheld devices. And so let me veer a little bit here because I know how much you guys love it, so a little fist pump. Honk your horns if you're happy. Here's what I really think. Right now, you're driving with somebody who's probably texting. And if not, look to the left and right of you as you're driving and see how many people are texting. Aren't you scared? I'm scared to drive now. People aren't looking at billboards, not even looking at the stinking road. This is very, very important. The culture shifts that we're seeing are substantial. The way we consume media is substantial. Something I recently said since I've written this book is communication is being disrupted. We know that the music industry has been disrupted, but the way we even communicate with each other, I actually heard from a buddy of mine that his friend's mom twittered that dinner was ready. She couldn't yell like dinner time, no more ringing the bell. Literally, she tweeted dinner's ready, and that was the quickest way to get people downstairs to eat. Culture shifts are in the air. Though girls ages 14 to 17 can still out-text anyone, averaging about 100 texts per day compared to boys of the same age who text about 30 times a day, texting isn't just for kids anymore. As of May 2010, 72% of the adult population were texting at a rate of about 10 texts a day. What do you think that number will look like in 2013? Heck, what does that number look like right now? 72% in 2010 of May? By the time you're listening to this a year later, a little bit more, bet you were in the 80s, maybe even approaching 90, so incredible times. When they're home, they've got the same handheld devices at their side. Plus, they're glued to their iPads and computers. Most of them are not just reading AOL's homepage anymore. I guarantee you that. They're engaging with the content and their friends on Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare, Dig, Reddit, and a slew of websites you've probably never heard of. So why are you buying banner ads on AOL.com or Yahoo.com? Many of the brands that were relevant even 5 years ago no longer command respect or excitement because they've lost touch with their customers by continuing to talk to them almost exclusively via traditional marketing platforms. The customers aren't there in nearly the numbers they once were. They're on social media. You need to follow them, talk to them, there. If you wait for your competitors to do this, and they do it right, they will steal any advantage you might have had right from under your nose. For example, Zagat was the original consumer review destination, the Burgundy Bible for foodies, a 20-year-old golden brand that never should have had to fight for relevance or survival. Yet, because it was so slow to recognize that customer expectations and desires were changing, the company has had to roll up its sleeves and start swinging to defend itself. The Zagat story is a great example of how resistance to change and poor anticipation skills can hurt a giant in any industry. On the other hand, they're also an example of how companies can make a comeback once they figure out how to harness the innovation they once fumbled. To get a feel for the battle they've been waging, all you have to do is compare their timeline with those of one of their biggest competitors, Yelp. Now this is fun. Pay close attention. 1979, the Zagats hit upon the idea of collecting opinions from and their friends' friends of New York City restaurants to create an informal yet reliable restaurant guide. Over the next 2 decades, the Zagat Review becomes an internationally recognized force in the culinary world, with over 100,000 contributing surveyors and loyal readership. 1999, Zagat launches its website, but only paid subscribers can read full reviews. 2004, former PayPal employees Jeremy Stoppelman and Russell Simmons, not that Russell Simmons, launch Yelp from a San Francisco Mission Street office. The decidedly hip site offers free access to user reviews of restaurants, day spas, and other local businesses. 2007, Yelp reports 5 million unique visitors. January 2008, the Zagats try to sell their business for $200 million. There are no takers. May 2008, Yelp reports 10 million unique visitors. June 2008, the Zagats take the business off the market. July 2008, Yelp releases the Yelp for iPhone app. The application is free. November 2008, Zagat releases the Zagat to Go iPhone app. It costs $10. July 2009, Zagat holds steady as one of the top 10 iPhone apps in the travel category. August 2009, Yelp, which is still free, reports over 25 million unique visitors. September 2009, Zagat.com, which charges a $25 annual membership fee, gets about 270,000 unique visitors per month and is trending downward. December 2009, Yelp turns down a $550 million offer from Google and a $700 million offer from Microsoft. Yelp has the chance to become one of the great internet brands, says Stoppelman. That for me is a chance of a lifetime. January 2010, modeling Foursquare, Yelp adds a check-in feature to its app upgrade. February 2010, Zagat teams up with Foursquare. Foursquare users can earn a foodie badge when they check into a Zagat-rated restaurant and receive menu recommendations from the Zagat collection of reviews. August 2010, Zagat is ranked the most followed brand on Foursquare by OSnaps with 65,000 followers. August 2010, Zagat integrates food spotting, which allows people to post photos and comment about the foods they love rather than read and write full-blown reviews into the Zagat to Go app. If Zagat had kept an eye on the innovation horizon, Yelp would have never been able to cut into their market share in the first place. Yet, as you can see, Zagat has swung hard and gotten in a few good hits. It is possible for brands, websites, and new businesses to take market share from sleeping giants and even become market leaders. But if the sleeping giant awakens and uses the brand equity it has created over the years, it can absolutely get back into the game. This is good news for any larger organization that is only now recognizing that it needs to make social media a priority. Ideally, however, any giants who are awakening will adjust because they understand what is happening around them and want to adjust, not because, like Zagat, they have been backed into a corner and have no other choice.